Guru Sri Juta Padakamalang.
Hare Krishna, welcome to our channel Bhagavad-gita. Here it is, because we have it, Bhagavad-gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and my name is Lavanga Latika. We have reached the 9th chapter now. We are just starting, and it is called The Most Confidential Knowledge, and I'm starting with text 1, spoken by Sri Krishna. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha idang tu te guhyatamang pravakshyam yanasuyave jnanam vijnana sahitang yajgyatva mukshyase shubhat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence." Purport. As a devotee hears more and more about the Supreme Lord, he becomes enlightened. This hearing process is recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The message of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed among devotees. This cannot be achieved by the association of mental speculators or academic scholars, for it is realized knowledge. Yes, we hear these things, we understand some principles, we learn some facts, we learn some terms, but it doesn't end there. What happens is that these transcendental subject matters enter our ears, and we can engage our intelligence, we can make sense of the world, but they also enter our heart. And we are by nature spiritual. We do by nature have a understanding of spiritual existence, a relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So not only do we learn these structured things of knowledge, but something happens also. It is a process of waking up to our spiritual identity. And then it becomes realized. And that happens not just by repeating words, but by having our heart touched. And that happens in connection to another person who has that realization already. The devotees are constantly engaged in the Supreme Lord's service. The Lord understands the mentality and sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness, and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of devotees. Discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association and tries to assimilate the knowledge, then he will surely make advancement towards spiritual realization. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes in this 9th chapter matters more confidential than any has already disclosed. The very beginning of Bhagavad-gita, the 1st chapter, is more or less an introduction to the rest of the book, and in the 2nd and 3rd chapters the spiritual knowledge described is called confidential. Topics discussed in the 7th and 8th chapter are specifically related to devotional service, and because they bring enlightenment in Krishna consciousness, they are called more confidential. But the matters which are described in the 9th chapter deal with unalloyed pure devotion. Therefore, this is called the most confidential. One who is situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna is naturally transcendental. He therefore has no material pangs, although he is in this material world. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that although one who has a sincere desire to render loving service to the Supreme Lord is situated in the conditional stage of material existence, he is to be considered liberated. Similarly, we shall find in the Bhagavad-gita, 10th chapter, that anyone who is engaged in that way is a liberated person. So we have these terms, we understand them to some extent, that in this world we're looking for liberation. But liberation doesn't exist in a vacuum. Liberation means freedom from the material bondage. And when we are freed from material bondage, then what? Then who are we? Where are we? What do we do? What is existence like? It's hard to imagine, because we're actually so conditioned by this material existence, by our bodily identification, by our impressions in this world, lifetime after lifetime. It's actually difficult to consider what would life be like without it. And therefore, often when we hear about liberation, it is explained or understood in personal context. When the soul is freed from this material body, then it merges with all the other spirits, just like pots with air. If you break them, the air merges with the outer air. Yes, but we are not air, we are persons. Krishna is a person, and here we will come closer to him. Throughout the Bhagavad-gita, we come closer and closer and closer. But here, the most confidential knowledge. Now, this first verse has specific significance. The word idam jnanam, this knowledge, refers to pure devotional service, which consists of 9 different activities: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshipping, praying, obeying, maintaining friendship, and surrendering everything. By the practice of these 9 elements in devotional service, one is elevated to spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness. When one's heart is thus cleared of material contamination, one can understand this science of Krishna. Simply to understand that the living entity is not material is not sufficient. That may be the beginning of spiritual realization, but one should recognize the difference between activities of the body and the spiritual activities of one who understands that he is not this body. Yes, so we start there. We start in the 2nd chapter, where Krishna very thoroughly explains the nature of the soul, how we are not matter but spirits, and individuals, persons. But then we come to the 4th chapter and we hear of the Supreme. And they're already there, even already in the 2nd chapter, we're ahead of the surrounding society in spiritual knowledge. And if we don't establish that fact, that we are not this body, we are the spirit soul, we have no motivation to go further. Because if we're this body, and then the body dies, then really nothing is very meaningful. The spirit soul is by nature seeking happiness. But if we don't know about the spiritual dimension of life, we will seek that happiness in this world. We will seek immediate pleasure, which is not happiness, but they are easily confused. Now, that is the platform we start off. If we don't understand that's difference between spirit and matter, then we're not going to do anything further in spiritual life. But it's quite important to also understand the 4th chapter. There is a difference between us and Krishna. We remain persons. We remain related to the Supreme Person. But we've read that. Now we're going further. These 9 devotional processes of devotional service, hearing, and chanting, they start with hearing. We hear the knowledge, we hear Krishna's name, and we repeat that knowledge and share it, and we meditate on Krishna's name individually by chanting it kind of quietly to ourselves. Not too quiet, we need to hear it. And also together in Sankirtan, we go out and sing and dance, and everyone's welcome to join. Those 2 are the starting points. They are very important. In the 7th chapter, we have already discussed the opulent potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his different energies, the inferior and superior nature, and all this material manifestation. Now, in chapter 9, the glories of the Lord will be delineated. The Sanskrit word anasuyave in this verse is also very significant. Generally, the commentators, even if they are highly scholarly, are all envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most erudite scholars write on Bhagavad-gita very inaccurately. Because they are envious of Krishna, their commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain Bhagavad-gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. So such commentaries should be very carefully avoided. For one who understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very, very beneficial. This word comes up sometimes, envy. And what is envy? We tend to see it in a very, in a very limited way. Somebody has something and we want it, and then we're envious because they have it and we don't have it. But actually, envy is the basis of this whole material world. Envy of Krishna is the reason we are here. Envy means that we do not accept Krishna's position because we want it for ourselves. That's one definition of envy. The other definition of envy, which I believe is Prabhupada uses it all the time because it's a little bit of an older usage of the English word. It means I don't find my English word. I have very good Swedish words. I will use them when I speak about it in Swedish. It means that you wish. It's the opposite of being a well-wisher. Like normally, if we see somebody, we hope that they will be happy. We will hope that they will be successful. We hope that they will enjoy their lives and have success in this world, especially in a spiritual sense. Envy is the opposite. I have had that. I've been working with people who have been discussing, I wanted to have something, but what was the meaning of having it if I couldn't at the same time see that my neighbor didn't have it? And I'm like, I don't understand it. It is such a useless quality. It is actually everything else in this world. We hear of it. We hear of, lust and anger and greed, and we hear so many things. They are negative. They are material qualities. We are supposed to overcome them. But they can all be used in a spiritual sense. If we have strong desires, strong longings, and we apply that to Krishna, then our spiritual life takes off in great leaps and bounds. If we have this anger towards those that hinder Krishna and Krishna's devotees and people in general from coming in contact with Krishna, of course we can't just go out and yell and scream and fight, but that anger that focuses on the real point can be a very can be a good impetus for doing things right. Greed, if we want more and more service to Krishna, more and more love for Krishna, more and more service to the devotees, then we can apply greed in a very healthy and spiritual way. Envy, we cannot use it for anything. The only reason we're in this material world and not in the spiritual world is envy of Krishna. And then that envy expands because we see all the living entities, they are part of Krishna, and we can't stand that they have something and that they are happy. And we see it, especially nowadays, I would say, we see these articles and comments that, these people who don't work as hard as us and who are not born here in this country with us, they shouldn't have anything. They should go back to their wars and just die and suffer because we can't stand it that somebody gets something for nothing. Well, why do we have something? If we believe everything we have is the result of our work, it's not really true, because we have some privileges that enabled us to work, to have an education. If we're born in a country and we're envious of those who are coming and knocking on our door because their country's, on fire in a war, it's not a natural law that we have everything and they have nothing. So Prabhupada speaks about spiritual communism in Krishna consciousness. I'm also reading right now in the Bhagavatam. Yes, I will probably not go through Bhagavatam in this way because that would take hundreds of years and we're not going to live that long. But try to get hold of the Bhagavatam. Try to hear and Bhagavatam with devotees, because all these stories, they are fantastic. We get closer to Krishna. The whole book starts with Maharaj Parikshit. He's the grandson of the Pandavas. Here we hear Arjuna. He's one of the Pandavas. And then after this war is over, spoilers, they will win the war, but basically everybody else will die. And they will take care of the kingdom, but they will also be disillusioned and frustrated and just desire to give up this world. It happens a little later. So they walk off to the north, and they leave this kingdom to Maharaj Parikshit, who takes care of it very nicely. So Maharaj Parikshit, he's this king who takes over after the Pandavas, and this is at the start of this Kali Yuga. And when Kali Yuga starts, the personality of Kali comes there, and he's beating a cow and a bull. And this bull is the Dharma personified, religious principles. He has beaten Dharma so severely that he only has one leg to stand on. How you even manage to stand on one leg, I have no idea. This is the Bhagavatam. And the cow also. And Maharaj Parikshit is saying, who is doing this? Do they think just because Krishna has left, Arjuna has left, that in the kingdom of the descendant of the Pandavas, this can go on? This cannot go on. I will protect you. In my kingdom, everyone is protected. Who has done this to you? And a little bit of a philosophical discussion ensues that we may come back to, and please read it. It is wonderful. Anyway, Maharaj Parikshit concludes that this is Kali who is the culprit. The bull will not point him out, but he can draw his own conclusions. So he's saying, I am the king here. My job is to protect all the praja, all the living beings in my kingdom, human beings, animals, especially the cow and the bull. So you have broken our laws, and therefore you will be sentenced to death. And then the Kali personifies, falls at his feet and begs for forgiveness and begs for shelter. And then he cannot refuse him shelter. So if someone takes shelter of you, you can't refuse him that shelter. So he says, you can be in some place where these sinful activities happens, meat eating, illicit sex, gambling and intoxication. And then he says, there's still a problem. In your kingdom, these things are not going on. So I still need No, he says, yes, I will not kill you. I will banish you from my kingdom. And he says, that doesn't work because the whole world is your kingdom. Yeah, okay. So you can go to one of these 4 places. That also doesn't work because these things don't happen in your kingdom. So then he says, okay, you can be in the places where gold is hoarded. So anyway, these stories, I get carried away by them. So what I meant to say is, Maharaj Parikshit is not sentencing him to death out of envy. He's not like, oh, I hate him so much, I want him to suffer, I want him to die. That is not his motivation. His motivation is first to protect the praja, the living entities in his kingdom, to protect religious principles so that he himself and everyone in the kingdom can develop spiritually and live peacefully in this world. But also, this is also difficult to speak about, because when we speak about the death penalty, the modern day death penalty is not the same thing, because the rulers they don't have this spiritual vision, and they don't have this they don't represent Krishna, and they don't have enough developed societies and intelligence to exactly know who is guilty and who is not guilty and how to deal with it. So therefore, better not to do this capital punishment at this point in time. In a Vedic time, a king who knows that a person in his kingdom has caused harm to the whole kingdom by breaking this religious principle, if the king sentences him to death, then when he dies, that karma is finished, and in his next life he starts fresh. So it benefits him also. It is not an act done of envy. It's not an act done as revenge, or So this envy, it is never appropriate. In this material world, especially in spiritual life, if we're envious of Krishna, if we're envious of people around us, and if we see this envy in our heart, then that is the first step. If we can recognize it when it comes up and realize that this is beneath me. This is not a quality to hold on to. This is something to grow out of by taking to a spiritual practice, especially by chanting Krishna's name, but also by adopting this attitude. I am the servant of Krishna. And not only am I the servant of Krishna, because you can see that if you're the servant of God, or if you're the servant of the king, or if you're the servant of the boss, that puts you quite high. But actually, I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. That's our idea. So that is what we are going for. So we will read this 9th chapter and be very serious about not giving a home for this envy in our hearts. Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Thank you for watching. We aim for updates every Tuesday and Friday. Please come back. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down there. We also have some links and information for you. And there is, of course, the subscribe button. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
I'm a Hare Krishna, and I approve this message. Subscribe.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.